Hello, everyone. Week 4 here, week 4 response. I don't know about you, but I can't believe we're already talking about week 4 in this course. I think it's gone by very fast, and I've really enjoyed every bit of it so far. So hopefully you're in a similar boat as me. But as I share some of my remarks, a couple of themes jumped out at me. Uh, in no particular order, Holmes talks about joy unspeakable and contemplative practices, specifically in her context of the Black church. But one of the things I pulled out was that there is no single right way, or perhaps there's no one way to engage in a contemplative practice or to experience a contemplative practice. Not unlike prayer or worship, there's no one right way. And I love that. I love that sense of inclusivity and flexibility relative to contemplative practices, uh, because it means that each and every one of us can come to God and engage with God, listen to God, respond to God in ways that are meaningful to us, right? I mean, what might work for one may not work for another, may not work for a third. Maybe a combination works for a fourth. Regardless, there is a sense of, again, flexibility and inclusivity as it relates to engaging with God. And I really appreciate that, whether it's in the Black church or in other churches, regardless of the denomination or the congregational makeup. There, that's a big theme that I seemed to pick up on. Um, and I think that too, kind of pulling off of that, when an experience is contemplative, it does so when it creates space. So a practice becomes contemplative when it creates space for the participants to listen to the voice of God or to listen for the voice of God. So maybe God is speaking and they hear it, or maybe the person is trying to hear that voice. Regardless, uh, when we create space in the actions and the behaviors that we do, it can become this sense of contemplative. Contemplative. Well, that's going to be a tough word to say here, right? Contemplative. And allows us then to respond in holy ways. Those opportunities where humanity and the divine can come together is where we can experience those contemplative practices. One of the connections that I made is, again, and I've gone back to O'Laughlin a few times, as some of you probably have as well. And much like O'Loughlin's Eucharist, talking about ritualistic experiences and practices, I see contemplative practice having that same underlying sense of ritual. We do things over and over. There's a repetitiveness. Now, it may not always be the same. How we worship may not always be the same. How we try to engage or commune with God as an individual or corporately may not always be the same, but there can be similarity from week to week to week. And so it's not just rote repetition or memorization, but it's engaging in similar actions. And then there's kind of an echo from one moment to the next, and it's a ritual in many ways, at least in my interpretation. So just drawing back on O'Loughlin a little bit was an interesting connection, and I'm not surprised if that's why Dr. Randolph had us begin with O'Loughlin's writing, because I see parallels going back to that first reading time and time again. As I read through, an experience or an emotion, it was hard for me on this one because I experienced something through the reading, as well as the video that was shared. But I can't put a name to what that emotion or feeling is, if that makes sense. But what I feel, and I referenced this a moment ago, is this idea that we all can approach God in a way that is meaningful to us. And I love that, because the relationship that I have with God is going to be different than the relationship that Eve has with God, or that Chris has with God, or that Annie has with God, or Richard, or any of us have with God. And so, because our relationships are different, how we approach God will be different. How we listen for God will be different. How we engage and respond will be different. And this reading in particular, Joy Unspeakable, helped. That's what I felt, I guess. And again, I can't put a name to it. If maybe it's a sense of freedom, or again, inclusivity, flexibility. But I did walk away with this great sense of an appreciation that we can all go to God in different ways. Uh, One of the questions that popped up for me and that I shared is that in the video, the role of religion in African American culture, Reverend Dr. Kenneth Harms talked about some biblical examples of black skin being looked at in a negative way. And the interpretation, for example, was Cain, whose skin was turned black from the smoke of his sacrifice that was not deemed worthy, or Noah's son Ham, who was cursed and therefore his skin turned dark. I don't read that anywhere in my translations. And so I don't know where these interpreters got that same or got that particular interpretation. Aside from just blatant racism, maybe I'm answering my question with my question, but I just don't know where that came from. I mean, there's just nothing there that I can see that would suggest it, other than cultural assumptions. So I went over time, as I probably have over every week. It's so hard to pull all this into a brief comment, but look forward to listening to your videos and the responses, and welcome any of your questions or items that you may have agreed or disagreed with here as well. So congratulations on week 4, and we'll see you all on the flip side.